Over the past couple years, I've noticed there's been an uptick of older manga finally getting a fully completed anime adaptation. It seemingly all started with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure back in 2012, and likely gained traction with Sailor Moon Crystal and Parasite the Maximum in 2014. While some take place in a more fantastical setting like Dorohedoro and Dororo, a lot of these stories were set in the time period they were originally written in. For example, the 1990s hit manga Fruits Basket. But its adaptation managed to avoid having to make major changes to the plot to let a modern audience enjoy it. Urusei Yatsura's adaptation, however, left the story in the 1980s and barely changed any of its designs. So how important is a time period to a story setting? How much can you get away with and change? While this is from an English-speaking literary standpoint, the 1993 movie Clueless is a retelling of Jane Austen's novel Emma. In a paper written by Melissa Masnian entitled Reviving Emma in a Clueless World, the current attraction to a classic structure points out how many plot structures and themes can be tied back to its relevance to the modern day. Masnian's article discusses how Clueless is set after the sexual revolution of the 1960s, allowing for the topic of sex to be more prevalent in the story than the source material. According to Masnian, you can look at these themes and what they meant in the time they were set, and how you can transform them into the modern day. This, of course, applies to things like politics and allows the viewer to understand how these things can be topical to today. Well, if you're going to leave it in the original time period at least. With how the anime market works today, it's become common to completely translate the story for modern audiences. As you can glean from the title, we're going to be looking at two specific examples of stories with their themes tied to the time period in which they originate, that being Go Nagai's Devilman and Akemi Yoshida's Banana Fish. Okay, I know both of these anime are now 6 years old at this point. They're in elementary school now, good for them! These two anime were created for the anniversaries of their respective mangaka being, well, mangaka. Both came out in 2018 and were highly anticipated release as there had never been a completed animated adaptation of either story. Each of these stories are deeply rooted in the politics of the decades they were written in. Banana Fish focuses on a crime-ridden NYC and the continued interference of the United States in Latin America, particularly with the drug trade. Devilman focuses on the horrors of war and the fear of another war starting during the Cold War era, which resulted from the 1968 and 1969 Japanese university protests and the ongoing Vietnam War. Reading them now in the 21st century still gives you a sense of relatability as things change, where you can see how similar the conflicts can be even in the past. However, the directors, Hiroko Atsumi and Masaki Yuasa, were tasked with giving these over 40-year-old stories a modern update to give entry to newcomers and anime-onlys. We'll take a look at how these two anime managed to adapt each series to the modern day, and whether or not I think, in my own personal opinion, they did a good job. This is an op-ed piece. I am sharing my opinions with you for free. My approach to literary criticism comes from, the Western American approach, so I may in fact be missing some key components that are probably more obvious to an Eastern audience. Just putting that out there. So let's get into it. Let's start with Banana Fish. Okay, so let's give you a quick rundown before I hop into my analysis if you're not familiar with this manga. Banana Fish is a shoujo manga written by Akemi Yoshida that ran in Shokugan's Beseto Shoujo comic starting in May 1985 and concluding in April 1994. The story centers around NYC street gang leader Ash Lynx after discovering that his brother was a test subject for a drug called Banana Fish during the Vietnam War. The Croatian mafia boss that has used him for prostitution, Dino Golzin, plans to use the drug for his own gain and present it to the US government to aid in stopping socialist governments in South America. Ash tries to thwart Dino's plans and is joined by one of his brother's former platoon members, Max Lobo, and his best friend and fellow gang leader, Shorter Wong. Unwittingly, one of Max's associates, a photographer from Japan, Shinichi Ibe, gets dragged into the mess. More importantly, his assistant, Eiji Okamura, also gets roped into it. He and Ash have that homoerotic vibe that goes on in post-Year 24 shoujo manga. Ash edgy fucking real, baby! In Ash's attempt to discover more about Banana Fish, he is forced to kill Shorter after he becomes another test subject. This creates tension with the rest of the Chinese gang and its new leader, Sing Suling. The youngest brother of the Chinese mafia, Yuet Lung, hatches a plan to kill Eiji to fuck with Ash. Ash spends his time getting revenge on both Dino Golzine by stealing his stock money and one of his gang members for double-crossing him. He succeeds, but it lands him in the hospital. The US government, fearing he knows way too much about banana fish, sends him to a mental health facility to use him as an experiment. Ash, now with more information about banana fish, escapes with the help of Max and eBay. Despite being reunited with Eiji, Ash now has to worry about Yuet Lung, who has joined forces with Golzine. They hatch a plan to turn Ash back over to Golzine in return for helping kill Yuet Lung's brothers so that Yuet Lung can become head of the family. The plan involves threatening to have Eiji killed by Ash's mentor Blanca, and only stopping if Ash goes back to Golzine. Ash surrenders, but he won't be used as a prostitute like before. Instead, he's forced to use his genius-level intellect to come up with a plan to start various coups using banana fish. Eiji and Sing hatch a plan to save Ash from Golzine's crutches, succeeding but ending up on the run. Golzine hires a crazy-ass fascist mercenary named Fox to retrieve Ash once and for all. In the midst of this nonsense, Eiji is shot by a member of Sing's gang as ordered by Yuet Lung. Funny. Also, Blanca joins the gang. It's fine! Ash surrenders to save his gang and get information out about banana fish. Instead, Fox shoots Golzine and tries to kidnap Ash for some nasty-ass reasons. Sing and Blanca rush off to save Ash. While this is going on, Max and his wife, okay, it's his ex, but whatever, have been compiling information on all the senators and White House staff that have connections to Golzine, meaning it's gonna come out that they diddle kids. Topical. And this shit drops in the midst of the final battle. Ash fights against Fox to get the last bit of info about banana fish and how the government plans to use it. At the last moment, Ash has to decide whether to save Sing or get the evidence he needs, and Ash lets the information about banana fish fall. Later, Eiji returns to Japan and gives Ash a plane ticket to visit him. Ash wants to go find him and gets stabbed by Sing's brother for killing Shorter. He dies. The fucking end. Akemi Yoshida would then proceed to never shut the fuck up and say the dumbest shit imaginable about banana fish for the next 30 years! After the manga's conclusion, an audio drama was produced by NHK. Banana Fish received several stage play adaptations in 2005, 2009, 2012, and 2021. Based upon an upload of the stage play from 2009 on YouTube, the series stayed in the 1980s. In a 1998 interview between Yoshida and Gact, yes, the singer Gact, did you know this is his favorite manga? Yoshida revealed that she has sold the rights for a live-action movie that has still not been produced. So that leads us to the anime led by Project Banana Fish and produced by Studio Mappa. Watching Chainsaw Man and shaking my head to let people know I disapprove of their business practices. Its director, Hiroko Atsumi, became a director specifically to direct an adaptation of Banana Fish. Good for her! It aired on Fuji TV and internationally was available on Amazon Prime. Their first episode released on July 5th, 2018 and concluded on December 20th. The series is set between 2017 to 2018. Ash's birthday was changed to August 12th, 2000, whereas his birthday in the manga is 1968. Boy, oh boy, we're dealing with post-9/11 American politics now. So, did the Banana Fish anime manage to capture the same energies as the original manga and transplant it into the modern day? Let's examine the character designs, the uses of technology, the change of setting, and most importantly, the politics. As some of you may know, Ash's original manga design was most famously inspired by River Phoenix. This is more evident towards the end of the story as he looks more like a Bishonen than he did in the beginning. The basis for his earlier design was Stefan Edberg, a popular Swedish tennis player from the 1980s. The anime settled with the more famous River Phoenix look, but made his hairstyle a bit more modern. Kind of funny since a lot of the 80s styles are coming back nowadays. They opted to give him a better looking outfit instead of the white top and jeans like his manga counterpart. Red Converse, ripped jeans. Yeah, he's a 17-year-old American, alright. I give it a thumbs up. Eji's design isn't a one-to-one like Ash. His hair feels less airy than it did in the manga, but I have an unconfirmed conspiracy theory. I think it's designed as based off of a prequel to Banana Fish called Flyboy in the Sky that features a 17-year-old Eiji. Wish he still had that Bishonen air about him. But whatever, I'll live. It gets a pass from me. Mrs. Funny the Hawaiian shirt from the manga. I wish Shorter was bald like in the manga. They gave him a cool sick hairstyle, which fine, very fine, but come on, he should be bald. It's funny. Yuet Long looks similar to how he did in the manga, and the same goes for Sing. Not much else to say, really. Blanca is given a much shorter hairstyle than he did in the manga. Why? People still like long-haired boys in shoujo, right? Right? The rest of the designs kill me because they took away the 80s porn stash for some of them, making them look like a lot younger than they actually are. This really isn't a critique about how well the story translated designs into modern day, but rather talking about how things have changed since the manga was written. In particular, a lot about how the black characters are drawn. Obviously, I am not black, so I cannot speak on this topic as an expert. I will, however, link a video by The Lost Crusader about this topic in the description box that talks about how black people have been drawn in anime and manga in the past and how it's changed. Yoshida drew a lot of the black characters in a heavily influenced American minstrelly style, evident in how she draws their lips. This was a common practice back in the day, and it's not fun to read a lot of older manga because of it. The anime actually does make the black characters look like actual people and not extremely old and racist stereotypes, so we'll give it that. Overall, I think the designs for Banana Fish are fine. I do like that they stuck with Ash's more iconic River Phoenix design and didn't make him look like a yaoi man like he does towards the end. I still wonder what happened with Eiji and Blanca looking blessed be shonen. Sad. Obviously, when Banana Fish was written in the 1980s, Yoshida didn't have to worry about smartphones and computers. The anime production team did. So unfortunately, that meant the removal of one of the funniest scenes in the manga. A bunch of people in their 30s being asked by two teenagers, "You don't know how to use a computer?" This isn't accurate because my parents were born around the same time as Max and Eve, and they know how to use computers in the 1980s. Whatever. The anime has to consider what would be more realistic in the modern era if a certain scene involved technology. When Eiji and Ash's close friend, Skipper, are kidnapped, they take their phones and throw them out the window since, as evident by another scene, they could easily be found with Find My iPhone. A lot of the time, scenes have to be completely changed. For instance, after Eiji escapes capture, he runs to go find a phone and contact the police. In the manga, because this is the 1980s, he runs to find a phone booth, versus the anime, where he runs to find a random civilian and asks to use her phone. My friend C, who helped a lot with my New York City questions, told me that no random person on the street in New York City is going to give you your phone, especially if they're covered in blood. Other scenes, such as when Ash and the gang go to Max's ex-wife's house to look for a phone book, have him looking up an address on Google. My personal favorite is when Ash looks up directions on how to get to Cape Cod, Massachusetts to Los Angeles, California. It's done to reduce time and help the pacing, but it removes a few humorous portions from the manga about being unable to read maps. With how often they use phones in the anime, you'd think they'd have to worry just a little bit with people tracking them. In fact, I'm a bit surprised there was only really one instance where this was the case. At one point, Ash tasks Eiji to get information from a doctor via Shorter. Eiji then blatantly uses his phone to track the location of the doctor. Unfortunately, Golzin's men end up finding the doctor regardless. They use the same excuse as the manga, someone was following him, but you have to wonder if that was the wisest choice for Eiji to do in his situation. One of the biggest changes by far has to be when Ash gets into the Banana Fish's creator's computer. In the manga, Ash has a hard time getting into the computer trying to guess what the password could be until he manages to find it. Yippee! Ash becomes Hacker Man in the anime, sporting skills that were mentioned in passing in the manga. He's able to completely bypass the password and find some hidden files. Funnily enough, the computer is running on Windows XP. Ash installed Bonsai Buddy. The specific technology changes for certain scenes make for great swaps, but still felt like some key components were missing. This really isn't any fault of the anime staff, but New York City is a lot different than when it was in the 1980s. I mean, obviously we had 9/11 in between the manga's ending and the anime airing. At the time of the manga's publication, there was an obsession with New York City and Japanese pop culture. It came with the idea that New York, at the time, was a mythological Wild West, heavily contrasting with Japan at the time, according to Friedrich L. I don't know how to pronounce that. Dreamland, Japan. When Banana Fish was written, Lower East Side street gangs were not as prominent as they had been in the 1970s. However, in an article written by Alex King in Huck magazine, said that the last street gang in the area didn't officially fade into obscurity until December 1993. Yet, the setting is crucial to the essence of the plot. Look, I know adaptations can be viewed as transformative work, but you can really only do so much until you're making something completely different. Banana Fish anime managed to avoid mentioning any sort of specific location in Manhattan. However, they do mention Chinatown a few times. The manga paints a picture of a very dangerous neighborhood, and to keep a low profile. Nowadays, it's really not all that dangerous. It feels out of place in a modern day setting. The Lower East Side is only brought up once, only being mentioned during Ash's revenge rampage that's become a mess. This is especially funny coming from his expensive 59th Street apartment. It's not going to be easy to translate into a modern world when the Lower East Side has been gentrified to hell and back. So the question remains, was there any room to have a discussion about the gentrification of the Lower East Side? It makes me think back to them mentioning 9/11 a few times in the show, but you have to remember, this was made for a Japanese audience in mind. They did do their due diligence and research, but there's still this idea of a gritty New York City in the minds of the international public, so I don't think they are going to spend the time talking about gentrification. Sad. Oh, speaking of Ash getting revenge, he concludes it with a fight in the East Broadway station. I am not familiar with a lot of the ways the New York subway works, so once again, my friend C answered my questions. This particular station is on the F train, which, according to C, is still full of graffiti. He even showed me some pictures. So leaving the graffiti on the train works. The other subway scene in the anime involves a much cleaner car. Since this story takes place around 1985 in the manga, it was more commonplace to have graffiti in the cars. Obviously now, it's much cleaner. Boo! It's the classism. Back to the train fight. It's still believable to have a fight at that subway station at 3 a.m. According to C, maybe for a few blocks, but not all the way to Coney Island. You know what though, guys? It's fiction. So close, enough. One thing in particular that stuck out to me was the removal of the okama in a scene where Ash sings "I'm a yummy yummy candy bar." That sounds weird and very odd out of context. It's a part of the escape plan during the psych ward arc. While he's singing to seduce some security guards in the manga, a bunch of pots appear in the background. If you aren't aware of what this is specifically, okama means pot in Japanese. It's used as a term in Japan that's basically just like their view of a stereotypical gay man. I have a link in the description that has a more in-depth look at the whole okama ordeal. So, to put it lightly, Yoshida was calling Ash the F-slur. The anime removes this completely, doing a more typical drag show curtain in the background. Another portion of the scene in the manga features, oh my god, Ash running his hands underneath his shirt with cats in the background. Once again, it's removed in the anime. The reason for cats? Well, neko in Japan is gay slang for bottom. Now, I tried to do some research on when the earliest usage of neko was, just to confirm, that's why there were cats in the background. Unfortunately, most sources I could find about this slang were from the late 2000s on, old yaoi forums. This could be a reason, or it could not. If so, Yoshida was calling Ash a bottom. Awesome. It feels like that's just typical of the time period, and obviously we don't make these kinds of jokes anymore. Although Yoshida has stated that Banana Fish isn't a BL, which is funny because her first manga is a BL, it's still reminiscent of the overtones of homophobia within the genre. Grateful that this sort of thing was removed, and it doesn't serve any further context within the story. Speaking of homophobia, in one story arc, Ash is sent to prison after being framed for killing one of Goldie's associates. Several other associates are tasked with monitoring him. In traditional fashion of Banana Fish, Ash gets raped by them. Max helps out Ash by taking him to a doctor and getting medicine. There's a side note about worrying whether or not he'd get AIDS. This scene was entirely removed in the anime. I can't tell if it's due to the epidemic being more prevalent in the time period of the 1980s or the fact it was kind of homophobic. It's not a major point in the plot, however, it feels reminiscent of the time period in which it was written. While not ever adapted as an OVA, Banana Fish's epilogue had Allie living in Greenwich Village. If you're not familiar with that area, you'd know that that was originally like the gay people area of NYC before it got gentrified because all the people living there were dying due to the AIDS crisis. Truly, how much can you change though? Is it worth it getting into the nitty-gritty of the politics of the time period and waxing upon it? Especially when there hasn't been anything indicating that in the source material. But we have to remember, this is taking place in a post-9/11 New York City, and that really means you do have to change its politics from the source material. I'm going to get super political and share more of my evil hippie leftist beliefs than I normally would on this channel. So, as a caveat, a warning, if you will. Banana Fish may come from an obsession with NYC, but it does not revere the United States. The narrative is thankfully very aware of some of the heinous things that the Reagan admin was doing in the 1980s. In the source material, the plan was to use Banana Fish to invade Nicaragua to entice a coup. This was confirmed as a tactic by the CIA. In fact, they did this to other countries in Latin America, like Colombia. For relevancy, the anime decides to change the focus to the Middle East, even having the opening scene specifically be in Iraq. While drugs aren't as big in overthrowing established governments in that area, it's still at the very least probably something that the US government tries to do. But oh boy, watching the anime now, when Ash says that one of the goals is to set up a puppet state in the Middle East supported by the US government, oh, it's all so painfully real. It still has Ash saying the White House can go screw itself in the anime, thank fucking God. When Ash goes back to Dino, he devises a plan to also start a coup in Honduras using Banana Fish. I did some research and the source is clearly biased here, but it later said that the government of Honduras supported the US coup of Nicaragua. It still feels like a thing to drive home the idea that this is being done in the self-interest of the United States. The anime's go-around is creating a country called Afghanistan to suppress the Tali. You can clearly tell that this is Afghanistan and the Taliban. Once again, watching this in the 2020s, it's so different. So their thing is to try an MK Ultra and have people go crazy, causing various governments to request help from the United States, thus furthering gaining control in the Middle East. While there have still been very clearly noted attempts from the US government to intervene in Latin America, like Haiti and Bolivia in recent years, this show is made with the Japanese audience in mind, meaning they're more likely going to be familiar with the US involvement in the Middle East than the continued interference in Latin America. It's still a very appropriate move, especially since, you know, this is post 9/11 United States. It gets heavier when you realize that one of its biggest proponents includes a White House staffer, a general, and a Republican senator. They even leave in the part about using Banana Fish to kill a Democratic senator who is potentially a candidate for president. Damn, it sure worked out that the admin in the White House was the Republican for both time periods, huh? Lightly cut for pacing, there was even talk in the manga about how specifically the Democrat they killed was looking into investigating the usage of drugs in Latin America. Now, okay, obviously, I know why this wasn't included in the anime. It was purely pacing. But considering the current direction of the Democratic Party and the time period, kind of funny. Man, why did I pick now of all times to do this project? Since we go about the angle of American interference in the Middle East, we also have to shift the war that Max Lobo and Ash's brother were veterans of, and that gets shifted to the Iraq War. It flows well into the story. The main focus is still, subtly lower-class men falling for nationalism. It does lose some sense of commentary of classism since it's not the Vietnam War. In the end, though, it's still the same, isn't it? American imperialism, awesome. There's still something to be said about the fact that Max Lobo, one such veteran, used to be a cop. Considering the political climate of the United States at the time of the release, as well as now, this is kind of fitting. It didn't need changing. They left it as is with Max quitting because he didn't see cops doing anything good or contributing to the community, which, yeah. On the flip side, there's the unfortunate circumstances of the source material being heavily influenced by American media that's full of propaganda. You're left dealing with Charlie and Jenkins as, well, see, they're the good cops, which I feel, especially in American media, is all too common. Of course, I'm not expecting a big marketed shoujo to dole out ACAB, but when you consider the other themes of the story, talking about American imperialism and how it affects various marginalized people, you'd think it'd do better to just have one former cop and two, it's okay, they're good cops. There's always been police brutality, but with the rising politics coming out of the late 2010s saying ACAB and I can't say they're probably not familiar with the politics when there's been people protesting, against the police in Japan as of late. They're very aware, but unfortunately, that's, just how the source material was written, coming from ye old propaganda from American crime movies. One thing in particular that I think got lost in translation due to moving dates is definitely what happens with Fox as a mercenary. When Ash looks up who Fox is in the manga, we discovered he was hired to help out in the Battle of Koze and supposedly died. The Battle of Koze involved French and Belgian forces fighting against a rebel group called the Congolese National Front. This group formed after defeating the Portuguese colonial powers in Angola. This group is rooted in Marxist ideals, and the battle and overall conflict is rooted in the decolonization of Africa, so, that gives us some perspective on what this asshole Fox is about. Plus he knows guerrilla tactics, something that becomes important later. However, there's not a clear-cut manner to put this sort of symbolism in the 2010s. While there is still some neocolonialism going on in Africa, that's not something that could be done that's widely known to get the message across. Instead, Fox and his mercenary groups had a fake death in Afghanistan. And of course, as something that was diminished due to crime constraints, when Fox goes after Ash and the gang as a form of intimidation, his first target is predominantly the Black Gang. It even spurs on racial tensions between Sing's Chinatown gang, one of the characters referring to another as an Uncle Tom. Wow. We don't get a chance to linger on this as, boy, God, do those last few episodes burn through 2 and 3 volumes in one episode. Not Atsumi's fault particularly, but they do manage to use the topic of racial tensions in the beginning with Yue Lung blackmailing Shorter over his sister and hanging, well, you shouldn't betray us for this white guy. This isn't really something I can speak on much, but when you're digging this deep into the themes of the story, it does feel relevant to keep that up throughout. So, despite all that, a few of my issues with the Banana Fish anime arise from the pacing issues. This is not the fault of Atsumi, as I said earlier, or any particular writing issue. I have heard that Atsumi actually wanted 3 cores for Banana Fish. Pretty fair for an 18-volume manga. Instead, she had to make do with what she could and 24 episodes. And it's fine. Several design updates work well, and shows how better the industry has gotten. The technology updates worked well within the story and didn't feel like an unnecessary drag. We didn't focus too much on some parts that I think could have worked as a hindrance to the main characters, like avoiding being tracked, but if you want to do a straight adaptation, there's limitations in how much you can change. I think the story would have benefited from discussing the gentrifications of various parts of NYC. There is an underlying theme of classism after all. In some ways, I suppose it's telling how well you can take a lot of the admin era shit and talk about the ways American imperialism has changed due to the interference of both Bush admins and the Middle East, or even how the world is affected by Obama's really fucking great foreign policy still. This was still at the beginning of the Trump admin's shit, so, American politics evolve, but the goals of it are always the same, huh? It's kind of harrowing how one of the few last scenes of Banana Fish involved a major press conference discussing the involvement of the White House staff in child exploitation, and many times throughout the story it says this is going to be a big breakdown of Washington when it gets out. And Banana Fish's anime came out only a year after the start of the Me Too movement, and a year before the Epstein case. And to my knowledge, the politicians involved in the Epstein case have not been published. And as when I wrote the script, a documentary dropped showcasing various predators at a popular kids channel. Things change, but the themes of yesterday can still apply to today. Which is why I'm a little surprised at how the other show I'm here to discuss managed to fumble a little bit. If you are not familiar with Devilman, I made a 2-hour-long vid about it. Let me play it for you. Got it? No? Well, okay. Devilman is a shonen manga written by Kiyoshi Go Nagai. The story ran in Kodansha's weekly shonen magazine from June 11th, 1972 to June 24th, 1973. Devilman tells the story of Akira Fudo, who gets roped into defeating apocalypse-causing demons by his best friend Yoasuka. Akira battles various demons as Devilman, such as Ogwell, Gelmer, Cyrene, and Jinmin, only to discover at the end of it all that his own best friend was Satan. It causes him to lose everything he had, including his adoptive family and close friend Miki Makimura. Satan, of course, is in love with Akira and does not want to fight him, but neither can admit they were in the wrong, and thus it leads to war. Akira dies. Ryo is sad. Ryo Kira Ryo. When Devilman was being published, it had an anime run alongside it, but this anime was geared more towards children and is way different than the manga. Ryo was famously absent from it. It didn't even get an attempt at a full adaptation until the late 1980s. Of course, it was based off of the light novel series written by Nagai's brother. However, they did use the manga as a storyboard in some cases. The OVAs would not be finished due to an economic recession in Japan in the early 90s. Since then, several other animated adaptations have come out, but like its first predecessor, never told the full story, such as the Amon OVA. I say animated because there's a live-action movie from 2004, but it's notoriously horrendous. There was a 2015 crossover OVA with Cyborg 09, but that was not really like an adaptation, and it wasn't really geared towards Devilman fans. There's also the light novels, but they're out of print and not very accessible. Anyways, that brings us to Science Saru's 2018 adaptation of Devilman called Devilman Crybaby. It was directed by Masaki Yuasa and written by Ichiro Okuchi. He wrote Gundam Witch from Mercury, so he is being given a pass for his other crimes. Crybaby in particular is heavily based off of the 1980s light novel series and the live-action movie from 2004. Several scenes added to Crybaby came from Gekiman, Nagai's autobiographical manga about making Devilman. The goal with Crybaby was to not only pay homage to various other Devilman adaptations, but to reference various other Go Nagai media. So the setup for Crybaby isn't a one-to-one adaptation like Banana Fish. Nagai is infamous for letting directors of his works do whatever they want, really. There is some contesting whether or not Crybaby is set in 2018-2017 or the early 2010s due to one singular scene saying that Akira's birthday is September 8th, 1994 and his age being 16. I'm gonna go ahead and assume it's the late 2010s since we see Trump as president. Several other adaptations have proved that you can bring the story to the current time period. However, that comes with some caveats. The OVAs didn't struggle because it was only set 10 years after the manga, and of course, we never got to the part of the story where all the anti-war commentary would start barreling down your face. The 2004 movie is a cinematic masterpiece. Lie. We can't give it much credit because it condensed a 5-volume manga into 2 hours. So, like Banana Fish's anime, Crybaby is the only complete animated adaptation. Just as before, we're going to focus on how well it translated the designs into the modern day, the inclusion of technology, and the transformations of its politics and setting. I'm going in for the kill for Crybaby Ryo's design. Sucks! Okay, I'll be more amicable. I think Ryo's design was done to make him more fashionable. It's very reminiscent of K-pop styles, particularly his haircut. The issue is, I don't think he'd be the type to like K-pop, even from the perspective of his Crybaby characterization. According to Gekiman, Ryo's original design was to make him seem cooler, and in a kind of funny way, made him unintentionally look like an American gay man of the time. I'm not sure if that was the intent behind the design, to make him look, more gay. It might originate from them pushing more LGBT themes in the story, so they gave him an undercut. It doesn't translate well, and it looks kind of stupid with a bowl cut and an undercut. However, Satan's design, good. It's more tolerable to look at, and they were so smart to give him longer hair in Satan form. Mwah, it's perfecto. There is a beta design of Satan that looks more like manga Satan, but they didn't use it. Oh well. Hey, imagine if we got Joshua Kiro looking ass Ryo. That's a hilarious beta design. Akira's design. His pre-Amon look is heavily influenced by Shinji for some fucking reason. Post-Amon, he looks entirely like a different person. I mean, most adaptations typically go the route of just giving him eyeliner and he generally looks the same. I feel the fact that he looks different post-possession ruins the idea of how others perceive you, sort of thing, and like the slight changes, blah blah blah. So to completely make him different just makes no sense. Whatever. Miki! I don't really have anything to say that it's like bad or good. It's fine. I miss the headband. She has this really cute sporty look that suits her character. I like it. It's good. Also, the fact they gave her green eyes and brown hair. Really fucking kin and Miki, I guess. I do not kin. It's joking. I am joking. It's a bit. Next up is Miko. Okay, some people argue that this isn't the same Miko from the manga, but they look similar in the face before this Miko gets possessed, so you know what, whatever. Anyways, my judgment on Miko's design from her original manga design is that it's kind of boring. The Crybaby design might be a reference to an outfit she wore in the Amon manga. I don't know, I guess they were trying to go for a more butch lesbian look after getting possessed. Miko also doesn't look that different after she gets possessed compared to Akira. I mean, she kind of does look a little different, but whatever. It's fine. It's not a horrible crime, but come on, you can't get more creative than a sports bra, shorts, and a jacket? Okay, Psycho Jenny. You know the sidekick to Satan? God, love her design. It's so fantastic. Also, I love the human design. The fact she's not even wearing a shirt under her blazer. That's so fucking funny. She's trying so hard. The human designs for some of the demons may actually come from another piece of Devilman media called Devilman Saga. Don't bother, it's dumb as hell. I believe Serene's design came from another manga called Sirene Tanjohan. It's whatever, really. I mean, I like some of their human designs, but it just defeats the purpose of the demons being, I don't know, monsters? Whatever. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of the art direction of Crybaby, and I wish they had gone the same route that Super Robot Wars did in terms of translating Nagai's 70s art style to the modern day. I just think that's Yuasa's art style, though. Moving on. So, okay, I can't properly separate the usage of technology from the setting in politics since those feel really tied together here. So, without further ado. The thing about the original Devilman manga is that you have to really consider the socio-political era in which it was written, as well as Nagai's background. It's very rooted in the Cold War era and the fear of another nuclear war, and it's written by a man who grew up post-World War II Japan during the American occupation. Within this setting, we have to go back to what that article about Clueless discussed in the beginning, how you need to recontextualize what a specific plot point would be in the modern day, and what has happened in between the source material and this adaptation. And in this case, it's a lot. One critical thing that has changed since the release of the manga and Crybaby is the usage of cellular phones, much like Banana Fish. Crybaby leads into more social media and online videos, and this is done in place of newspapers or word-of-mouth news. It fits really well within the narrative. I think of how Gekiman adapted a scene involving Ryo calling Akira, where he calls him on a cell phone instead of running to a phone booth. There's a couple bits, though, of Ryo tracking Akira on his phone, so like, you know, kind of weird. My personal favorite is Miki going on Instagram to defend Akira after he gets outed as a Devilman on live international television. It results in her getting doxxed in the process and conveys to the audience how the hatred of humanity can spread online. This feels like a believable characterization for Miki's character, both in the original and her Crybaby counterpart, defending her god brother because he believes in his humanity. Yippee! In the original, her neighbors just know her and decide to attack her via word of mouth. Crybaby gives it a modern weight by connecting it to the all-too-common internet phenomena of doxing and swatting people. You can even argue that Crybaby Miki got doxed in part due to her popularity as a student athlete, getting hate for being popular. There's more to discuss with Miki and the overall treatment of her character in Crybaby and the manga, but I'll get to that in a minute. We are still on technology. This translation falters in the scene where the demons are revealed to the wider public. Crybaby, in its efforts of portraying Ryo as a crazy ass, decided to make him live stream demons on his Twitch channel to the whole world. The original manga has Xenon, the head demon dude, I didn't mention him, I don't really care, do it instead. Its presentation in the manga reads to me like an air raid, with people rushing to shelter in anticipation of the carnage upon random citizens. It seems probable that Okuchi and Yuasa decided this was not as easily translatable into the modern day, as the audience would likely not understand the fear of an air siren going off, or necessarily having to worry about a nuclear bomb dropping on you. I don't think having some random influencer online going on his Twitch to tell you demons are real incites the same sort of panic. Mayhaps in our modern day, a lot of people people do get their news from political streams, which you probably shouldn't, but that's another topic. But it seems that this abrupt panic and fear of getting killed at any moment isn't in the story here. But what are demons and devilmen supposed to represent anyways? According to an old translation of the author's note from the 2003 bilingual edition of Devilman, becoming a devilman is a metaphor for getting drafted into war and how it can devour you even with the purest of intentions. Crybaby decided to translate this into making devilman be a metaphor for being gay and those who take performance enhancement drugs for sports. This is evident especially when Akira starts running with a Crybaby-only character, Coda, who is intended to be a gay man. Initially, as they talk, Akira says, "We're like one another," meaning that they're both devilmen. Coda seems to take it as being gay. In fact, Coda became a devilman while fucking his boyfriend, so, you know. The performance-enhancing drugs thing is only mentioned during a rapped Greek chorus song and implied with Miki's brother, Tare. Translating the idea of a devilman as the other fits well within the themes of the original story. At the same time, however, it dilutes the original metaphor. Why do our cast of gay heroes have what you can interpret as tainted blood? Like, they have yellow blood once they become a demon, or devilman, whatever you want to call it. Why? Also, just the association of demons with gay people? I can't help but wonder, would the metaphor be better had it taken the angle of why do people join the military now? For one, it can be related to classism. There's implications that Miko's incarnation in Crybaby, and even in the manga, is lower caste. They instead spend their time using her becoming a devilman as a metaphor for being a repressed lesbian, i.e. constantly thinking about Miki, angrily, and harassing her for no good reason. Can I say it works out fine in the end, what they were trying to do with her character. But as an adaptation, does this line up with being drafted into war? I wouldn't say it's exactly a 1-to-1, and I'm gonna be real with you. I don't even think they knew what they were trying to do with Akira's arc. In a queer reading of the original manga, you can argue that Akira is suppressing his attraction to men. However, because I decided to make Ryo the one in denial of his feelings in Crybaby, you can't make that same argument that, well, becoming devilman is symbolic of Akira's repressed attraction, since the repression goes to Ryo. Many others have noted the homoerotic nature of Ryo and Akira's relationship in the manga. For instance, one part of an article entitled "Female Hermaphrodites and Male Androgynes" discusses how Nagai works treat their queer men. I don't agree with some of its assertions, such as saying that Ryo Kira is not requited, but it does mention that Ryo Kira fits into that male-male homoerotic mold present in BL magazines like June. It gives you something to think about. Despite the manga having been written in the 1970s, the narrative is sympathetic towards its gay antagonist, and Ryo being gay isn't demonized by the narrative. When you get back to the idea of a devilman being a metaphor for being gay, it does make sense why they went that route in Crybaby, especially when they have Ryo's lie within the broadcast be, demons are just anyone discontent with society. Using Akira as the example makes it read as a forced outing. I can even go further with this symbolism by arguing that Akira, saying in the manga, "I may be a demon, but I still have the heart of a man," as being bisexual. I'm right. So it reads worse because why would you make the canon gay guy do it? Whatever. Ryo's message in the original takes a much more striking and potent take, that anyone can become a demon. It makes people's own fears turn on their close friend, likely resulting in killing more people. In the original manga, the demons become a justification to continue oppressing already marginalized people. Now, I will confess, Geki Man changes this to "both sides bad." I'm not 100% on that being the actual dialogue. A follower of mine alerted me that there are several mistakes in Geki Man, with 64 mistakes in the scanlation in the first chapter. Yeah, still. How do you make a more potent message about marginalized people in the fucking 1970s? Speaking of demons, Crybaby doesn't get a chance to explore why the demons are suddenly appearing. The original manga takes the time to explain that demons were once frozen in ice, and are now returning because the polar ice caps are melting. The manga's main focus is on overpopulation and pollution for the environmental commentary, as it was prevalent at the time of publication. I get dropping the overpopulation stuff, but come on, making the demons come out of ice due to the same corporate greed that causes wars, would have hit really fucking well. And demons, according to Geki Man, are just metaphors for nuclear weapons. It's heavily tied to the Cold War era. Even still, there's room for talking about demons in the sense of looming fear of a war, or the original, people fall for propaganda on either side of a conflict. I think the most egregious thing that was changed was the handling of the topic of war. One of the central themes that Akira internalizes at the end is, well, the real demons are humans. Damn, that global warming metaphor would be really fucking good about now. Crybaby ruined the realization of this message for Akira by turning it into a haha, let's all hug it out. Like I'm serious. The entire gruesome fucking scene of Kozo and Akiko being cut open is gone. We just get people hugging it out. Where is the metaphor for civilians dying unnecessarily? Sure, okay, I can see the for having them die to police brutality. There are a few instances of this topic with the rappers. This was probably done to shift the metaphor to the modern day, but I don't think it was needed. I think the original fits fine here. It's just missing torturing humans out of fear. And a kid doesn't abandon faith in humanity after making stuff. This seems like it was an attempt to align it up with Rio saying demons are those dissatisfied with society because they're supposed to be like disliked people within society, or at least I'm assuming so. But I don't know. It's not lining up with the authorial intent of Devilman is a warning as humanity steps towards a brighter future. Okay, that might be getting into analyzing literary stuff rather than discussing how well it translated themes into a modern day. We live in a society. Speaking of living in a society, you know what I think is a major theme that was probably not the authorial intent, but it's still there? Misogyny. How exactly is talking about misogyny really a part of adapting it to the modern day? Any work is misogynist, blah, 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 blah. I think it's crucial since, you know, the original manga is a shonen, and the way women have been written in shonen has changed. Feminist literary criticism is one of my personal favorites, and this is my video. So we're going with it. If you're familiar with Nagai's works, you may know that the way women get treated in them is contentious. They often manage to be written in an arguably feminist manner due to them playing larger roles in the story or even being leads. At the same time, they are often sexualized, and when around the male lead, get reduced to being an annoying fangirl. So in a modern setting, how would these issues be resolved? We'll focus on Miki and Cyrene here, as both are prominent female characters within the story. Let's start with Cyrene. Akira's fight with Cyrene is probably considered the most iconic of all fights in Devilman. Many are likely aware that Nagai originally wrote Akira raping Cyrene. Its only purpose was just to create shock factor and to have it be the first on-page sex scene in a shonen manga. His editor told him that it was a bad idea, and so did his brother, so it was taken out because it's a shonen magazine and it's not really in character for Akira. However, Crybaby decides to put it in. In fact, Cyrene's entire arc in Crybaby is such a downgrade, stalking Akira to goad him into sex to reawaken a bond, which you can argue is statutory rape, since Akira is confirmed to be 16 in Crybaby. The original was just Cyrene comes in and fights Akira, the end. Other adaptations have included her being pissed about Akira fusing with Amon and wanting revenge on him, which teensy bit misogynistic, because she wants her boyfriend back, but nothing to the extent of reducing Cyrene to being a sexual object and then later rape. Congrats on managing to be more sexist than something from the 1970s! Women exploring their sexual desires doesn't automatically make it sexist. Miko's on-screen masturbation scene is connected to her being a repressed lesbian. It's just when you're only using it for shock value, do I take issue with it? And boy, that sure was the original idea behind it, huh? Let's get to Miki. While Miki isn't sexualized in the manga, surprisingly, she doesn't really have a life outside of Akira and often gets just reduced to OMG, Akira! You know that one Casey Freyvine?
Hey Darren. What's up, bitch? Stop. Bitch.
Yeah, that's just how Miki and Akira interact in the source material. It feels one-sided on Miki's part. None of her flirting seems genuine, and a lot of their more kinder interactions involve teasing one another like siblings. Crybaby, on the other hand, actually lets her have friends and interact with people that aren't Akira, which is always good in my book. They decide to lean more into the sibling aspect more and their relationship. Their first interaction in the manga involves them getting harassed by delinquents for walking home together because they assume they're dating due to the era. Typically, you would hang around a woman that often because you wanted to date her. Lol. You can argue this scene's commentary on heteronormativity and compulsory heterosexuality, which, to be honest, is something that has a lot of backing to it. Nagai said in Gekiman that Kira and Miki ending up together is exactly what the audience expects. This reading got brushed over, and instead we have a few scenes in Crybaby where Miki rejects Akira's advances. And Akira was also doing it to make sure Miki didn't remember the night before. I'll get to that in a bit. At the end of the day, Miki is still supposed to be Akira's tie to his humanity. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if we're talking about queer themes in a story, wouldn't it make sense to leave in the idea of compet? Like, I don't know, Miki concluding she's just not interested in Akira. I was going to say Akira too, but let's be real. If we're talking queer readings, we have to acknowledge that Akira isn't so in denial of his attraction to men. And as I said before, Crybaby doesn't really go that route. Most of the discussion of being a queer woman went to Miko. Fucking superb, you funky little lesbian. Speaking of Akira and Miki's relationship, let's talk about the Agwell and Gelmer fight. In the manga, this was a lead up to the Cyrene fight, and according to Gekiman, is intended as a metaphor for civilians getting swept up into war. The fight with Gelmer and Agwell in the manga involves Miki getting attacked in the bathtub as a reference to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Obviously, Miki is going to be naked here. She's in a bathtub. Crybaby has her go to a creepy photographer's house. Unnecessarily, she dresses to take a bath because it is raining. They then take nude pictures of her. Later, she herself gets possessed, and the demon uses this in his advantage to try to kill Akira by seducing him. Yeah, we have his god sister. Yeah, naked. Cool. It loses the meaning and doesn't hold the same weight as it does in the manga. The last important thing in the story involving Miki is the final fight between her and her own neighbors. I briefly touched upon this when I spoke about the usage of technology and doxing. The lead up to the fight fits well within the narrative. When Miki dies in the story, she does not get fridged. Her death is symbolically the end of peace and has a major impact on the entire story. Her death really isn't something you could call sexist, and, you know, this is actually kind of funny, but Miki's death in the manga actually happened the same time that Gwen Stacy infamously got fridged in Spider-Man, the exact same year, both in 1973. That is so funny to me. Miki is representative of humanity. The trope of putting women in that role comes from misogyny. Women are pure and innocent and not capable of evil. Here's the kicker though. The crowd wants to kill Miki for becoming tainted. They assume that now she's a witch. Tee-hee. There's something so potent in the story that the final fight in the entire manga is human versus human. Miki and her brother are actively fighting back against the crowd. In Crybaby, Miko is added to the fight, and they end up running away. It might be because of a singular comment in Gekiman saying escape is impossible. It's more impactful for Miki to actively fight back. If only Crybaby did not water her personality down. That hatred of her being a witch would have been more handy had she been a mean little cunt as she is in the manga. So, in spite of all that, I know people love to rag on Crybaby, but I don't think it did its job from the angle I'm analyzing it from. Yeah, as its own thing, not an adaptation, it's fine. And you know what? I'm grateful that this was how English-speaking fans were able to discover a very influential and foundational manga. However, there were just so many themes that are particularly important to the story that are missing in Crybaby, like the chance to discuss that God in Devilman represents war profiteers or defense contractors. I think the team's biggest worry was whether or not the draft metaphor would translate well, or if they could incorporate the fear of nuclear war breaking out in the late 2010s. Considering the climate of the late 2010s and what has been brought on as of late, and if you pay attention to what the people who do the doomsday clock, the atomic bulletin, boy, wow, that thread is ever looming closer, isn't it, huh? Leaning more into a queer reading of Devilman had its benefits and added layers to the original message of the story, but it failed to actually tie any of those back to the anti-war themes. I do have to wonder how much they had to work against censorship with that gay shit. We got Miki, Miko, canon, and real, but they didn't even get to kiss. At the same time, with all this additional queer reading, Rio and Kira didn't really have much prominence, and their relationship kind of felt diminished, especially with turning that live television broadcast into a forced outing metaphor. The women were well written enough, but they felt a little too over-sexualized than their original manga counterpart. Cannot believe I am saying this, but how do you get me to say that a modern adaptation was more sexual than a fucking Gonagai manga? I can appreciate what Crybaby was trying to do, but it just missed the mark, especially with the time period of its release date. We were living through the beginnings of a global rise in fascism. With the original manga's time period, I think this fear of total annihilation of humanity can still ring true. And as I wrote the script, I fear we may be inching closer to another war. Okay, let's end on a better note, shall we? What Banana Fish and Devilman Crybaby set out to do was adapt a classic and influential manga to the modern day because #market trends. Banana Fish's story had something so strongly tied to the politics of the 1980s in the United States and still managed to come up with a really good way to adapt it for a modern audience. It shows how much the team cared about the source material. And on the other, Crybaby took a more fluid take on the story that resulted in some story elements getting muddied. Things that didn't particularly needing to be changed ended up getting modernized. It's interesting to me how both stories have a popular queer reading, with some people still debating whether or not Banana Fish should count as BL. It is. Read more BL. Open up your heart. And how these adaptions played more into these readings. Even if Ryokira was diminished, Ash Edgy wins, even when they lose. It's clear you can successfully adapt stories to the modern day. Sure, some fans would like it if it was just in its original setting, but it's market trends. It's an achievable task, and sure, other anime have just left it in the original time period for prosperity's sake. I don't mind this trend of seeing classic anime get adapted. I think some stories deserve to get adapted after so long, especially if they're a classic series beloved by all. But as you watch the animation market start to go downhill, and you see the progenitor of this trend, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, gets sent to Netflix jail for its last season and ultimately killed any sort of hype, studios are clamoring to churn out content and effectively dump them on a streaming site. You're left wondering how much longer they'd even have to stay on there. Banana Fish is only available worldwide on Amazon Prime. There's no English dub for it, and you'd have to get pricey imported Blu-rays to have physical media. The same goes for Crybaby. Sure, okay, it still has an English dub, but once again, for fans outside of Japan, well, joke's on me for taking forever on this video because as I was editing the script, a tweet dropped that said we're finally getting the Blu-ray in the UK and North America after 6 years. Yippee! So, what's the future of adaptations like this? I don't think they'll end anytime soon, and we've seen many of them accomplish adapting the story. We've seen announcements for a Ranma 1/2, Roses of Versailles, and a Ray Earth reboot. Some of these things have aged better than others, only time will tell. But hey, if it gets you to read or watch something that's considered a classic, maybe it's a win.